Here's a new discovery in Cambodian art. Nevernak, or Nevernak, V-A-N-N-A-K. It's pretty large, 135 centimetres by 100 centimetres. Full-on abstraction. Here we are with Stan.
Hello.
I was asking him actually if, a lot of people travel to Cambodia. If someone came in here and bought something, can you dispatch it to them in Europe or America?
Yes,
or
we can, of course. Yeah.
Australasia?
Yeah, using DHL.
DHL?
Which is pretty secure.
That's German Post, isn't it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. D is for Deutschland, I think.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're insured, so once the painting leaves the gallery, it's fully insured, so...
Yeah.
And they're pretty efficient.
So yes, DHL is better in this part of the world. North Americans rely on FedEx, but has a much smaller presence around here, doesn't it?
FedEx, I contacted them, but they don't have cargo.
Yeah.
So they're a little bit light for now. I think they would change, but DHL is a bit more. Yeah, they've got their own cargo.
Yeah, yeah.
So and FedEx they cannot take big parcels. They've got a limit. And they spend wide. That will come soon.
Yeah.
I'm running in England. For now, DHL is in England, so
very, very different.
Very British, very English, and and I like the accent because it's very clear, very. And sometimes people from America when they speak, they use different words.
Well, they invent words all the time. They invent words.
Well, you get new words.
They've changed English.
It's even when I watch a movie, in English, I put the subtitles in English just in case. If it's an American movie, some words, some slang, I'm not I'm not going to go what. So sometimes I just go back a little bit, but without the translation, I'm thinking about racism in America. You knew you did a bit of segregation there, but not, I realized later on, and talking to people and looking at documentary, that especially in jazz, we had all those African American coming to Paris to play in clubs, play jazz, and the best Miles Davis stayed a long time. And when you look at the documentary, they say we were able, we were able to sit at the terrace of a cafe with a white lady, and people say "sir" to you. In America,
that's
right.
You
cannot do that. Nobody calls you sir.
No, nobody.
Oh my God.
Did you see that Bernard Tavernier film around midnight? That was African-American jazz musicians living in Paris.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Okay.
Even Marvin Gaye went and lived in Belgium for a while.
Because it must be heavy. And even now, some parts of America, there's racism anywhere in the world, but it was in the 60s. Wow. Even Miles Davis. Miles Davis was when he stayed in Paris. He stayed in Paris a long time. He had what's her name? I forgot her name.
French girlfriend. Yeah.
French girlfriend, famous. Anyway, she's interviewed. Now she will be dead now, but she said, "I'm going to New York to the Astoria Hotel or whatever it was," and I called Miles. Hey, come down. At the hotel. Blah, blah, blah. I was doing something for maybe whatever work. So Miles Davis come down to the hotel, they meet in the lobby, they have a drink or food or whatever, and he leaves, and when he left, the staff from the hotel or the manager said, "You cannot do that.
Yeah.
You cannot bring it back. Don't do it again. Bring it back."
Yeah.
And she was like,
I know.
What's going on? So things have changed now. But
I lived in Chicago for a long time, and there were areas that were black.
Yeah.
No cinemas, no banks, no supermarkets, nothing. Like a big jail. So even if they had any money, they had to go to a white area to spend at the supermarket. So they were spending their money in white areas. So,
what year was this? I just get it here.
This is about 20 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's like a ghetto, poor area. So
well, not only that, when they had the riots in the 60s and they burnt it down, the mayor of Chicago just said, "Oh, well, they burnt down the area. We're not going to fix it."
Right.
So I went in there and it was like going into a Vietnam war zone. You know, somewhere between Vietnam war zone and a jail.
Yeah.
And people say I called a taxi to go in there, wouldn't come and get me.
I always say, because I'm optimistic, but then, I always say the world is getting better. People normally say, what do you say? You know, this. If you look at the history and statistics and everything, the world is, I think human beings are getting slowly better, you know, compared to the Middle Age, to even the last century. Century, how many wars? 2 world wars.
Well, it is supposed to be the best time.
Yeah, but I think this the human being is growing in terms of being a better person. It's a slow process.
I certainly noticed,
but it's better. I mean, that's
with
sure.
well-educated Americans, and Canadians. They were really switched on. They were really, you know, they knew. I went to an art opening in Buffalo, New York, and there was an artist there, quite famous, Tony Conrad. And I said, I was from New Zealand. He said, I've just read this book on soil erosion in New Zealand, and started talking to me about, you know, what New Zealand was doing wrong with its landscape.
Oh, okay.
It blew my mind. You know, this guy was an avant-garde artist.
Yeah, he was. He was knowledgeable.
Very, very. But you know, the general, you know, you get badly educated at the bottom, but those people at the top, man, pretty respectable.
Well, yeah, I've met in my life some very intelligent people, very educated, and they were not nice people. So the education helps a lot. Yeah. But you know, it's not enough. Actually, thinking about this, I used to work in music business, you know, with musicians, long time ago when I was in London, and I'm doing painting now. And if you think about it, the art world, this is where there's no, you know, almost no racism, because it's all about art.
Yeah.
And then if you come from a bit of a sort of normal background, a bit sort of maybe racist or whatever, and you become an artist, and then you will naturally meet people from all over the place, and this is great because you meet everybody, and there's no racism because we talk about art. We love the same thing. You understand?
I found that in the USA.
Yeah.
When you met artists, they were very welcoming. You know, they were pleasant. They were knowledgeable. You know, I really, you know, but I also lived in some small towns in Canada, and there it was more closed. You know, Toronto was fine. Toronto, you know, artists were open. I like that. In New Zealand, I found it a bit closed.
Sure. Just for the last word, you know, because I'm an honest person and I like to tell the truth. I have to say I've got a problem with some people from New Zealand, you know. Yeah. Sometimes, yeah. Because,
me too.
Because they beat us at rugby all the time. They beat us at rugby all the time. Yeah. You know, they always win at the rugby. Yeah. So I feel a kind of racism. You know, I'm very, very bitter about people from New Zealand.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, but you're okay. You don't play rugby, do you?
No.
No, it's okay. You're okay. Joking.
I thought France beat New Zealand the last time they played.
Actually, I don't even follow the rugby, to be honest.
Whoa, look at that. Man, oh man, it's just the...
That's Nevernak.
Same person?
No, this is Stan.
Oh, that's Stan.
Yeah,
that's Stan.
He's a nice guy, very nice guy.
Nice guy.
Yeah, and that's
this is Nevernak again. Are these acrylic paints?
It's acrylic and oil mixed with resin. Yeah. And it's totally abstract. And it's great because it's not in Cambodia.
Look at that. Boo. Yeah. And do Cambodians like this sort of work?
Yeah. She studied a little bit in Singapore. And she's extremely easygoing. And
this looks like it's made by a very bitter person. A very bitter person. A person who hates New Zealand, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, she's pretty good.
Yeah.
And she's a new discovery, you said.
Yeah, well, I didn't discover, but I saw some pictures and I went to a studio where she paints. And then she does some portraits. Yeah. And she does this, and I'm not a very big fan of portraits, but that's, you know, it's two different things. But she started doing this not so long ago, and I was like, wow. You know, some abstract.
Look at this big glob here.
Yeah.
Massive.
Abstract from Cambodia is great.
That's three-dimensional.
Yeah. And I think she's got it because she says, I'm having such a good fun doing this. I need it's good fun.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
you know, that's the most important thing is to have fun when you paint, you know.
Yeah.
And I think she's got it.
Look, that's almost figurative there. That could be a calf or a goat, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Could be.
So there's a, you know, when you paint like this, there's an element of luck.
Yes.
There's an element of serendipity, you know, and you have some control over it. But then things happen. When things happen, you go, oh, okay, and then you know, it's a bit like a performance.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing. It's so enjoyable. That's sunshiny, so that's very precise painting.
Yes.
Yeah, very unique.
That almost looks like dripping paint, doesn't it?
This is called red line because it's got some.
Oh yes.
The peacock is caught into some piece of string.
Ah,
So
I see. So it's environmental.
This is due to observation, you know. Because Chenchen come from that number, and he was, you know, he said he grew up in the jungle, so that's.
Yeah. I know when I was in Cape and they said it's okay in the jungle back in the hills behind the beach. All the leopards have gone now. But there were snakes, cobras and vipers, you know.
Yeah. And this is New Surrey.
Yeah.
New Surrey, another gentleman. Yeah. Bringing abstract to, you know, traditional paintings, bringing abstract to it. And this is,
I see.
He's got his own signature.
Yeah.
And he says, like, you know, I was asking when the blue is here. And he said, the blue for me is water, you know, it's humidity, it's the water element to it.
I'm not sure, is it a little bit fauvist? That reminds me of some French paintings, you know, but I can't put my...
Well, if you think about it, it reminds me of Van Gogh in a way, but with the bigger strokes.
Yeah.
But all the sort of strokes like this, Van Gogh using small strokes doing his painting, but it's all about strokes, a bit bigger strokes. But, you know, it's great to see some Cambodian painters doing some abstract.
Yeah.
And figurative, in different way rather than traditional. Yeah, so a lot of creativity and a lot of...
Cambodia is definitely a country on the move. You know, before I came here I didn't know much about it, but I've been, you know, this is a great city, Phnom Penh.
Yeah, well, it's been, you know, moving fast for the past, 10 years?
10 years, yeah. That's about, you've been here about 10 years, haven't you?
11 years, yeah. And it's a bit, you know, exponential, you know.
Yeah.
In development. That's why it's time to have you know, a nice, proper art gallery in the center of Phnom Penh, visible from the public. You know, and a lot of people come in and look, and you know, I have a lot of young people coming in.
Yeah, young Cambodian.
Yeah, and they take photos. A lot of influencers doing
social media,
doing you know, TikTok.
Yeah,
and amazing. So the other day I went to buy some pastry on Street 51 at Kaiser, and with my daughter. I was going to take my daughter to school, and the guy looked at behind the counter, looked at me and said, "Are you a painter?" So then, yeah, how do you know? He said, "We're famous on Facebook."
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, within his social network.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God.
That's good. That's
well,
good.
Well, that shows you that Phnom Penh is not so big yet. I mean, that's why Phnom Penh is not too big.
You know, as Cambodia gets richer, art will become more important. Art, culture, leisure activities. Yeah. They just, you know, as people get richer.
Well, look at China. In terms of spending, America represents something like 38% of the market, and China about 36%.
Really?
So it's like 2/3 of the world market is divided between America and China. So China 20 years ago, that was starting. So now China is, you know, of course they have a lot of money. They invest. They buy $20 million paintings. You know, you can maybe sell it for 10 million more later. I mean, there's some investments. There's some great artists in China, and it is number 2 in the world in terms of you know, spending on art. So.
You know, American art is only since 1945 anyway, isn't it? As an international thing.
Something like this, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching an interview of Pierre Soulages, a French contemporary artist. But he went to America, but that's after the war.
Yeah.
And he started to meet like Mark Roscoe and all those guys, and was starting there. Before, and he was already established a little bit. He was getting there. And they said at this time the museum didn't want to, or the gallery didn't want to take any, avant-garde or modern art because they didn't understand it. There wasn't any market. And then they became the 10 years later they were the best.
Well, it's because all of the European artists went to avoid the Nazis. Went to New
some
York.
of these too, yeah.
Like Mondrian, Kandinsky, didn't he? Marcel Duchamp.
Marcel Duchamp, it's funny guy, Marcel Duchamp.
Picasso didn't.
Picasso stayed in Paris. He didn't go. He stayed here, and he was quite political. Actually,
and Jean Cocteau, he stayed in Paris too, I think.
Jean Cocteau, he was smoking opium anyway. So
Many stories.
My favorite artist.
Jean
Cocteau is so complete.
He did some funny things.
Yeah, he did. My God, what was the? He did something my English.
He did it.
He did a show. He built up a show. He wrote a show in 1920, just after the war, and he asked Eric Satie for the music.
Yeah.
He knew this one, and Picasso for the
scene. Yeah.
Well, come on, it was called Parade. And it was very long. He didn't do very well. It was like, come on, that's great.
He would have been young men.
That's something funny. I read a few days ago that Dali was supporting Franco, during the. I know he's a funny guy. Dali is like.
He was on. Dali was on American TV game shows. He was like a hack.
He did, cheap. He did, I think he liked the business aspect of it. And he liked selling himself and. But apparently Picasso, when he supported, all the artists didn't support Franco. They want to even to help, like now in Ukraine. They went to Spain to liberate Spain from Franco.
Even I think Cocteau was accused of collaborating with the Nazis. I'm not sure, but
I've not heard that. But I'm not sure. But
quite a few did. But who was Louis Ferdinand?
It's complicated because some artists wanted to work, wanted to do things. So obviously, if a German newspaper asks you to do something, sometimes they do it for work or for art, and then after they go, but it's very,
to invite it to Nazis for dinner.
It's very complicated. It's very complicated. So Picasso didn't speak to Dali after that. Picasso was quite,
Picasso was good, wasn't he?
Yeah,
really interesting.
Good, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Vietnam in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
But I'll be coming here every 3 months or so.
Just do us a favor sometime. If you go to see a gallery there, if you see, just maybe send me.
I can video and just put it on my channel.
Yeah, just see what's happening there. It'd be interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. Because I've no time to move and do things.
That's my plan.
And I want to investigate Bangkok and Ho Chi Minh.
Hanoi too.
And Hanoi, yes.
Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi are different,
Of course, still.
Hanoi is high class.
Yeah.
More conservative maybe.
Yeah.
Even the movies of the 60s, you get a sort of a more political cinema from Hanoi, and Saigon, it was like cheap, trashy stuff, quite good. But it's probably becoming more respectable now.
Yeah.
So, but that's a great city. Okay, Stan, I'll put this up on YouTube, probably on Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Yeah, make sure. Can you do some post makeup or post? No,
I'd like to see your all black sweater there. Very good.
Just Photoshop me a lot.
Yeah. If I do that, your wife might get worried.
What?
Hey, if I sort of Photoshop you to make you look sexy, then your wife might not like that.
That's the point.
No,
it's okay.
She's tired of these romantic Frenchmen.
I'm too old for this, Martin.
Yeah, don't tell me. Okay, have a good day, Stan.
Thanks, Martin.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.